It was supposed to be a quiet day, a simple congressional oversight hearing, just a formality. Reporters sat half-bored with pens in hand waiting for standard comments and legal jargon. Cameras blinked silently. Outside, protest signs waved faintly in the distance, but inside, the air was cold and stiff with tradition. At the center of the courtroom sat Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, powerful and unreadable. Her black robe moved only, slightly as she adjusted her papers. Her eyes scanned the room with practiced control. She had faced presidents, crushed legal giants with logic, and ended debates with a single sentence. No one expected anything new today. Then they called the next speaker. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stepped forward. She was young compared to the others. Her bright eyes, bold red jacket, and steady walk made some in the room lean forward. She placed her papers down slowly and adjusted the mic. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was clear. Not loud, but it had weight. "I came here today not as a politician," she said, "but as a daughter of justice." And today, justice feels silent. People looked up from their phones. She continued, her words sharp but smooth. "We've seen a pattern of surveillance, of racial profiling, of targeting communities that have no power to fight back. And when those communities ask why your systems, call it national security." Reporters started typing. She quoted names, dates, case numbers. She told the story of a 15-year-old black student monitored by a federal program after joining a school protest, a woman deported after filing a complaint against her employer. "These aren't just accidents," Jasmine said. "They're patterns, and patterns have authors." Justice Sotomayor leaned slightly forward. Her eyes narrowed. "Still, Jasmine?" Continued. Her voice grew stronger. "I am not here to perform," she said, looking straight at the bench. "I am here because the Constitution gives me that right. If I will use it, not whisper it." That's when it happened. Justice Sotomayor raised her hand. The gavel tapped once. "Congresswoman," she said, her tone even but sharp. "This is not a campaign rally." A few gasps floated through the room. "We are here to examine law," Sotomayor said. Her gavel tapping again, "not to entertain political theater." Jasmine paused. She looked around the courtroom at the marble walls, the guarded doors, the stiff faces watching her. She took a breath, leaned into the mic, and said slowly, "Your Honor, the Constitution was written to be read aloud in places like this, especially when it's being ignored." The silence was immediate. Some reporters blinked. One man lowered his camera, mid-shot. Clerks stiffened in their seats. Sotomayor's voice lowered, but it grew colder. "Congresswoman, if you cannot keep your remarks within the boundaries of judicial relevance, you will be dismissed." Jasmine stood still. Then she said it. "Then dismiss me." Because if a black woman raising her voice about injustice is too loud for this courtroom, maybe the silence here is the real problem. The room didn't move. Not one sound. Even Sotomayor's hand hovered above the gavel but didn't strike. In that moment, something shifted. Not just in the hearing, but far beyond it. Reporters knew this was not a usual story. This wasn't politics. It was something heavier, something true. And outside, in the crowd beyond the glass doors, someone hit record on their phone and whispered, "She just changed everything." The video hit 12 million views in just under an hour. Clipped, edited, and reshared across every platform. Jasmine Crockett's bold words echoed far beyond the courtroom walls. "Maybe the silence here is the real problem" became a chant. On the streets, young people painted it on cardboard. Older activists whispered it with tears. News anchors debated it. But across all the noise, one thing was clear. Something had broken open. Inside the Capitol, the reaction was mixed. Some lawmakers praised Jasmine's courage. Others accused her of disrespect. One senator went live on air saying this was an ambush, not a testimony. But he didn't mention what she had said dumbly, how loudly she had said it. Meanwhile, Jasmine remained quiet. She walked out of the hearing with no statement, no smile, no drama, just silence. Her phone buzzed constantly. Journalists called, editors begged. Activists thanked her. Even foreign diplomats sent anonymous messages. You are not alone. But Jasmine didn't answer any of them. Not yet. That night, she sat alone in her apartment. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what had begun. She knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It hadn't been ever. She thought about her mother, who had once been arrested during a protest for housing rights in Dallas. Jasmine had been 9. She remembered watching her mother get taken away, screaming that the system wasn't broken, was designed like. This, at the time, Jasmine didn't understand. But now, every courtroom, every microphone, every threat made her mother's words feel more alive than ever. As the sun set, a courier arrived. He handed her a sealed, unmarked envelope. No return. Address. Just her name, typed in small black letters. She opened it slowly, expecting threats or worse. Inside were photocopied documents. Old, some yellowing at the edges. Some had official seals. Others were blacked out with thick ink. She found a short note inside. Your testimony shook something. These cases were never supposed to be seen again, but they deserve light. Read? Carefully. A friend, she scanned the files. Most were legal records, names of defendants, charges, dismissals. But one line appeared again and again, stamped on the corner of over a dozen documents. Judicial override authorized. Level 7 confidential foreign interest monitoring. She frowned. This wasn't normal. These weren't simple closed cases. These were buried ones. Each file had similar patterns, accused individuals from marginalized communities, often charged with vague crimes, disruption, interference, potential, national threat, and all were dismissed. Quietly, but not without being monitored or deported. One file hit harder than the others. A woman named Dee Morgan, arrested in 2013 after filing a lawsuit against a private military contractor. She'd claimed abuse and unlawful surveillance. The case was dismissed in the interest of national stability. Jasmine recognized the name. That woman had disappeared shortly after. She placed the file down. Her chest tightened. Who had sent these? Why now? Suddenly, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. A deep voice, disguised by static, spoke. They're watching now. Don't speak long. They want to control the narrative. Who are you? Jasmine whispered. Doesn't matter. What matters is what you do next. Tomorrow, they'll try to frame this as an emotional outburst. As noise, you need to show them its truth. Then the line went dead. Jasmine stood frozen. The silence in her apartment was deafening now. The glow of city lights outside her window felt distant. She picked up the files again, stared at them. Then, slowly, she walked to her desk, opened her laptop, drafted a letter to the press. There is a reason why I didn't flinch. There is a reason why I spoke the way I did, okay? And now I have proof the system knew what it was doing. I will not be quiet. I have documents, sealed by fear, opened by conscience. And tomorrow I will speak again. She clicked send. Across the city newsroom lights blinked on. Editors shouted. Lawyers were called. The leak had begun. And somewhere in the shadows, someone whispered. She found the whisper file. The morning news didn't open with war updates or economic forecasts. It opened with Jasmine Crockett's letter and the leak. Screens across the country lit up with her words. Anchors spoke carefully, some nervously. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett alleges she has received classified judicial documents pointing to the existence of a covert legal protocol. One allegedly used to bypass constitutional review under the label of foreign interest monitoring. Most didn't know what that meant, but people understood the weight of her tone. They understood what she was saying between the lines. The law hadn't just failed people. It had been weaponized against them and hidden afterward. By noon, hashtags filled the internet. Hashtag whisperfile. Hashtag justice was designed hashtag. Crockett tells the truth outside federal courthouses in New York, Chicago, and Atlanta. Protesters gathered, holding signs with a new chant. This silence ends now. Jasmine remained mostly out of sight. Her staff refused interviews. Her team issued only one message: the Congresswoman will speak when the time is right. The documents speak for themselves. But inside a secure room in the Capitol, powerful, people were not calm. A panel of federal officials, judges, and intelligence advisors reviewed the leaked documents. The term whisper file hadn't been seen in public since 2007. Even then, it had only been whispered behind closed doors, an internal nickname for legal programs created under the cover of post-9/11's national security laws. These files, though, were different. They showed that judges, some still active, had approved legal decisions without informing defense attorneys. In some cases, even without notifying Congress. The justification: national cohesion, racial unrest, probability, and the chilling phrase, threat profile, cultural resistance. Back in her apartment, Jasmine sat with her old college friend Malik, now a civil rights attorney. "They'll say you're lying," he said quietly, scanning the files with shaking hands. "They already are," she replied. "I'm not here to convince the liars. I'm here for the people who always knew something was wrong, but couldn't." "Prove it." She pulled up a document stamped in faded red ink. Case ID F3499. Name: Deja Morgan. Classification: confidential level 7 status. Sealed external monitoring. Suggested trigger phrase: systemic racism. Malik blinked. Trigger phrase: they were watching for people who used certain words in public, Jasmine said, then classifying them. "This isn't just racism," he said, voice low. "This is surveillance built on the idea that fighting injustice makes you a threat." She nodded. "And the highest court in the country sat on top of it." At that moment, Jasmine's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time she let it go to voicemail. But a text followed. "Your next move decides everything. Don't go to cable, go live, go raw. They're planning the counterattack." Attached. A single audio file. She played it. It was a recording, muffled but real. Two men. Government voices. "Crockett speaks again. We leak her college file. Get the old boyfriend on camera. Paint her unstable. And the documents. Already classified as fakes. The DOJ will issue a denial tomorrow. If she keeps going, we go nuclear. Make it personal." Jasmine looked at Malik. "They're going to try to kill the messenger," he said. She stood up. "No, they're going to try. But I'm going to make it too loud for them to silence." That evening, Jasmine reached out to Alina Ruiz, trusted international journalist from Al Jazeera, who had covered regime abuses in Sudan and leaked files from Afghanistan. "I want to go live," Jasmine told her, unedited. "No filters. Straight to the world. You'll be burned for this," Alina warned. "They'll come at you hard." "They already are," Alina agreed. The plan was set. At 9 p.m. Eastern, a stream went live from an undisclosed location. Jasmine, no suit, no makeup, just a plain black shirt, a wall of documents behind her, and her voice. She looked into the camera and said, "They told me this courtroom wasn't for political theater." They were right. It's not a theater. It's a crime scene. For the next 30 minutes, she showed document after document, described the secret network of judicial decisions, played the leaked audio. Millions watched. Thousands more recorded and reshared. And just as she ended her final sentence, "They can try to deny this truth, but I dare them to look me in the eye and say I'm wrong." The feed cut to black. A message appeared on every screen. Connection lost. Broadcast interference. Phones across Washington began to ring. The Department of Justice had gone dark, and Jasmine Crockett had just become the most dangerous woman in America. Phones didn't stop ringing for the next 12 hours. Newsrooms buzzed with panic. Editors shouted for legal clearance. Intelligence officers scrambled to assess how the leak had happened and how to spin it. At the White House, a crisis team worked through the night. Jasmine Crockett's live broadcast had reached over 18 million people worldwide before it was cut. And no one was saying who had pulled the plug. In homes across the country, families watched in silence. Some cried, some raged, and some, especially those who had spent years trying to be heard, sat in stillness, whispering, "She said it for us." But in Washington, the power players didn't feel awe. They felt threat. At 7 a.m., a senior national security advisor entered a locked room beneath the Capitol with a red folder marked Whisper File Legacy Threat Index. Inside were names people who had once uncovered parts of this same hidden legal structure. All of them had disappeared, been discredited, or quietly pushed from public life. The last name added Jasmine Crockett. Meanwhile, Jasmine was in hiding. Not for fear, for focus. She sat in a secure apartment above an abandoned bookstore in Baltimore. Alina Ruiz, the journalist who helped her stream the leak, was nearby uploading backups of the documents to cloud servers across Europe and South America. "They're calling the files fakes," Alina said. DOJ released a statement. "Fabricated materials without official origin." Jasmine didn't even blink. "I expected that," she replied. "That's why we keep receipts." She opened her laptop and showed Alina something new. A second envelope she'd received that morning. Came with no note, just a flash drive and a thumbprint scan. Inside were 5 video recordings. All grainy, all time-stamped between 2006 and 2014. Each one showed closed courtroom. Sessions judges speaking openly about suppressing racially volatile cases to avoid triggering public unrest. In one video, a judge even says, "This is not justice. This is containment. If the people knew what we overruled this week, the streets would be burning." Alina turned pale. This. This is beyond policy. This is conspiracy. Jasmine leaned back. "Now you understand why they're scared." Alina nodded. "So, what's next?" Jasmine looked out the window. "We give them something they can't cut off this time." That afternoon, Alina reached out to a trusted veteran journalist at the BBC, simultaneously. Copies of the Whisper File documents were uploaded to 6 independent transparency organizations worldwide. By the time the U.S. government issued its second denial, nearly every human rights legal counsel on Earth had a copy. But Washington wasn't done. That evening, a Fox News exclusive aired a segment titled, "Who is Jasmine Crockett Really?" The program featured a former ex-boyfriend, edited clips of college protests, and hints at unstable behavior during law school. It backfired immediately. Online users began stitching the hit piece with Jasmine's speech from the courtroom. The contrast was brutal. A woman speaking truth versus a system trying to paint her unhinged. Still, the pressure grew. In response to public outrage, a bipartisan committee of Congress demanded an emergency hearing to address national unrest caused by false narratives. Jasmine was summoned. She wasn't surprised. But she wasn't going to sit quietly. The next morning, Jasmine walked into the Capitol not in a power suit, but in a black turtleneck and jeans. Cameras flashed wildly. Protesters lined the streets. Some held up signs that read, "Let her speak. We knew. Now we know. Whispers don't die." Inside the chamber, the air was thick. Lawmakers sat stiffly. Some averted their eyes. Some glared. Jasmine adjusted her mic. They expected her to defend herself, to deny, to plead. She didn't. She opened with this. "What I revealed wasn't a secret." Not really. The poor knew. The brown-skinned knew. The silenced knew. "What I did was prove a tan that makes some people very uncomfortable." Gasps rippled across the hall. She continued. She named dates, cases, showed proof, played the video clips. And then she did something no one expected. She named a sitting. U.S. Senator, the head of the Judiciary Committee. As one of the architects behind the Whisper Protocol's original authorization, Senator Harold Quinton, a man now running for president. The room exploded in chaos. Cameras flashed. Yells rose. The gavel slammed down hard, but no one was listening anymore. Jasmine raised her voice over the noise. If speaking truth makes me dangerous, then let me be dangerous every single day. Because silence didn't protect our people. Silence protected you. And then she walked out. Reporters ran after her. Staff shouted her name. Some senators screamed for security. But she didn't stop. She had just shattered the center of American politics. And the world was listening. By nightfall, America wasn't the same. The headlines told one story. Crockett names presidential candidate in judicial conspiracy. But on the ground, in streets, homes, and across the globe, the feeling was much deeper than shock. Was exposure? The kind of raw truth that couldn't be spun by PR teams or softened by anchors. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just spoken, she had pulled the curtain wide open. And now the international response had begun. In Geneva, the United Nations Human Rights Council issued a formal statement. We are deeply concerned by the evidence presented by Congresswoman Crockett. The alleged systemic manipulation of justice based on race and descent is not only a domestic crisis, it threatens the credibility of the U.S. as a global moral authority. Within hours, ambassadors from the European Union requested an emergency session with the U.S. State Department. Countries that once shared intelligence openly with Washington began freezing data-sharing agreements. The British Prime Minister, in a subtle but firm tone, said during a press conference, "When justice is conditional, alliances must be cautious." Meanwhile, back in the States, Jasmine went underground again. This time, it wasn't just about safety, it was strategy. She stayed in a secure location in New Jersey, a safe house known only to 3 people: her attorney, Malik, journalist Alina Ruiz, and an anonymous cybersecurity expert who had helped whistleblowers in the past. They called him Patchwork. No real name, no face, just a voice on encrypted calls. Quinton's team is trying to delete the Whisper file from every public server, Patchwork warned. They're flooding the web with corrupted versions, even paid to boost fakes on social media. Jasmine clenched her jaw. They want people to get tired of searching, tired of caring. They want confusion to win, Malik added. But Jasmine wasn't giving up. She had one more card to play. A week earlier, when she received the original files, there was a second USB. It was marked only with a phrase in Latin, Fiat Lux. Let there be light. It contained one single Documenta classified report from 2011, signed by then Vice President Harold Quinton. It wasn't just a link to the Whisper file, it was the authorization order to begin judicial surveillance of culturally defiant communities. It described social justice groups, Black student unions, immigration, protest leaders, and civil rights lawyers as potential accelerants. At the bottom of the file, approved executive order under emergency powers. Jasmine stared at it. This wasn't just the system being corrupt. This was a man building it for power. She looked at Alina. We go global tonight. I reached out to the International Tribunal for Justice and Accountability, a non-governmental alliance of global legal experts. Jasmine sent the file with only one sentence. This document is the root of everything. I am prepared to testify. The tribunal responded immediately. They invited her to speak via live satellite session to a closed assembly of international judges, rights investigators, and former heads of state. It was the kind of platform that couldn't be muted by American media or smothered by domestic politics. But the moment the live stream began, the signal flickered. Patchwork's voice came through Jasmine's earpiece. We're under attack. Someone's jamming the signal. The screen went black for 5 seconds. Then it lit up again and a backup server routed through Norway. The session resumed. The room of judges sat in dark robes under soft white lights. Jasmine appeared on the large screen above them, and she began. I am here not as a politician, not even as an American, because the whisper file does not just affect Americans. It sets a global example that fear can justify anything. That silence is a virtue. I refuse to accept that. Spoke for 20 minutes. Explained the origins of the whisper protocol, the suppression of court records, and the racial profiling embedded in the digital infrastructure of law enforcement. She described how Harold Quinton had personally signed off on policies that mirrored the behavior of regimes America once condemned. And then she showed the 2011 document. Judges in the room gasped audibly. One whispered, "That's an executive-level directive." Another simply said, "God help us." After the feed ended, Jasmine stepped away from the camera. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the knowledge that she had just gone too far to turn back. She was no longer just fighting for public awareness. She was now at war with the most powerful system in the world. And as she turned to leave, Patchwork's voice crackled in her earpiece. They just froze your bank account. Your congressional access has been revoked. You're officially being investigated for treason. Malik cursed under his breath. They're going to come for you hard now. Jasmine nodded. Then we make it impossible for them to bury me quietly. And in that moment, with enemies closing in, governments turning cold, and the nation's power brokers tightening their grip, she smiled, because the silence was already broken, and she was still speaking. The arrest warrant came at dawn. No cameras, no flashing lights, just a cold knock. 3 agents and a quiet piece of paper. The charge: authorized dissemination of classified material with intent to destabilize national institutions. In bold type, treason. Jasmine Crockett didn't run. She opened the door, looked the agents in the eye, and asked, "Do you understand what you're being asked to do?" None of them answered. One simply said, "Ma'am, we have orders." She held out her wrists. The cuffs clicked. In less than 2 hours, every major news network in the country had this story. Jasmine Crockett taken into custody by federal agents. Some called it justice, others called it retaliation. But the footage of her walking out, unafraid, hands bound but chin high, would become one of the most iconic political images of the decade. Inside the federal holding facility, Jasmine was placed in solitary confinement. No contact. No lawyer. No calls. Just a concrete cell and a camera in the ceiling that blinked every few seconds. They wanted her quiet, but outside, the world wasn't. Massive crowds gathered outside federal buildings in D.C., New York, and Chicago. Journalists demanded answers. International leaders issued statements of concern. A Brazilian senator compared her arrest to the tactics of a collapsing democracy. The Canadian Prime Minister simply tweeted, "Truth should never be handcuffed." And then the video dropped. Not from Jasmine, not from her team, from Patchwork. Without any warning, a 12-minute edited clip was released to major platforms worldwide titled "The Real Quinton File." It included Jasmine's full tribunal testimony, the 2011 executive order signed by Harold Quinton, and most damning of all, a hidden camera recording of a closed-door meeting between Quinton and 4 high-ranking judges. In the video, Quinton says, "We don't need to silence everyone, just the loudest. If Crockett falls, the rest scatter." The public erupted. Within hours, #FreeJasmine trended globally. By noon, 3 members of Congress called for Quinton's resignation. That evening, a federal judge quietly ordered Jasmine's immediate release. The White House, caught off guard, refused to comment. When Jasmine stepped out of the detention center, her wrists bruised but her eyes unshaken, a crowd of thousands waited. They didn't cheer. They stood in silence, holding candles. A protest built not on noise, but on unity. Reporters rushed her, but she held up a hand and spoke softly. They tried to make me a warning, but now I'm a witness. Not just to what they did, but to what we can become. She walked into the crowd, not toward the microphones, but toward the people. That night, she disappeared again. Not to hide, but to plan. The next morning, a trusted contact from the Congressional Ethics Committee delivered a message, had the votes. With mounting pressure, media exposure, and now the leak of the Quinton recording, the Judiciary Oversight Committee had scheduled an emergency vote to open an investigation into Harold Quinton. Jasmine would be asked to testify again. But this time, not as the accused, as a key witness. That afternoon, Jasmine held a quiet meeting in a private apartment in Southeast D.C. Alena. Malik and Patchwork were there. So was a retired federal judge, a cybersecurity expert, and a representative from the International Tribunal. We're not just fighting Quinton, Alena said. We're fighting a system that allowed him to operate in the dark for over a decade. Jasmine nodded. Then we don't just tear him down. We rewrite the rules. They began drafting legislation, a bill that would mandate transparency reviews of all sealed federal cases, require independent panels for national security trials, and abolish the emergency judicial override. They called it the People's Hearing Act. The plan was simple: testify, submit the bill, and build a coalition strong enough to pass it before the next election. Before the system recovered from the blow Jasmine had just dealt. But as they worked late into the night, Patchwork's voice came through the encrypted speakers again. There's one more thing. Silence. Then there's a file we haven't touched yet. Buried deeper than whisper. It's not about Quinton. It's about what they built after him. Jasmine looked up. After Patchwork continued, Quinton didn't act alone. And he didn't just protect himself. There's a second tier. A continuation plan in case Whisper was ever exposed. The room went still. Jasmine's voice dropped to a whisper. How many names? Dozens, Patchwork said. Maybe more. She looked at the bill they'd written. It suddenly felt too small. We're not just pulling weeds. Hearing room was packed, but no one spoke. For the first time in recent memory, the Capitol Rotunda held more citizens than officials. Some stood in silence. Some held printed pages of the Whisper file. Others held candles. Everyone waited. Inside, Jasmine Crockett sat at the witness table again, but everything had changed. She wore no bold colors today, no political pin, no media smile. It's just a simple black blazer and a worn folder with the words handwritten in ink. The People's Hearing Act. Across from her sat the Judiciary Oversight Committee, now led by a reluctant but tense interim chair. The former chairman, Harold Quinton, was absent treason 2 days earlier under a growing storm of public outrage. Global pressure and leaked recordings that made even his allies distance themselves. But Jasmine wasn't here to celebrate. She was here to finish what she started. She stood. My name is Jasmine Crockett. And what I'm about to say is not for the recordits, for the people who never had one. She placed a small stack of sealed case files on the desk. These are just a few examples. Hundreds, maybe thousands of legal decisions made not in open courtrooms, but behind sealed doors, based not on evidence, but on fear. Fear of activism, fear of race, fear of people who refuse to be quiet. She paused. The room didn't move. I was told justice is blind. But I have learned it is not. Sees everything and it often looks away. She opened the folder marked the People's Hearing Act. This bill does 3 things, she said. It ends emergency judicial overrides. It mandates that every sealed federal case be reviewed by an independent public panel within 1 year. And it gives victims of Whisper the right to have their cases re-examined fully, transparently, and with legal counsel. One of the committee members spoke up, her voice hesitant. Congresswoman, if this passes, it will open the government. to thousands of lawsuits, possibly tens of billions in liability. Jasmine looked her straight in the eye. And how much did silence cost them? She replied, the silence in the room was heavier than applause. Later that afternoon, as the committee voted to move the bill forward to the House floor, Jasmine walked out of the chamber into a storm of flashbulbs, chants, and tears. But she didn't stop to speak. She had one more place to go. She took a quiet ride alone, no security. No present arrived at a rundown apartment block in Southeast D.C. She climbed the stairs slowly, step by step, until she reached the door marked 107. An older woman opened it, Ms. Morgan. Jasmine asked softly. The woman, Deja Morgan, stared for a long moment before stepping aside. I thought they erased me, she said. They tried, Jasmine replied. But the country's listening now. They sat down at a small kitchen table. Deja poured tea with trembling hands. I never expected anyone to care, she whispered. I do, Jasmine said. And soon the law will too. Back at the Capitol, the vote was scheduled. Just 72 hours away. Cable news tried to shift the narrative again as a weather. Jasmine was too radical, too emotional, too ambitious. But their voices were drowned out. In cities across the U.S., people held public readings of the Whisper File. Law students analyzed the People's Hearing Act in live streams. Activists printed posters of Jasmine's quote, "If speaking truth makes me dangerous, then let me be dangerous every single day." On the morning of the vote, Jasmine stood outside the House chamber, facing a line of reporters. She took no questions, just said this. This isn't about me. This is about what happens when silence is no longer welcome in a courtroom. This is about what we choose to be when we finally hear each other. And then she walked in. The vote passed. By a narrow margin. 218 to 215. The chamber erupted not in cheers, but in stunned quiet. Even those who voted against it knew something irreversible had happened. History wasn't just made, it was heard. 3 months later, Jasmine stood again in front of the Supreme Court building, not as a lawmaker, not as a witness, but as the appointed chair of the new Independent Justice Review Commission. She stood quietly for a long moment. No podium, no crowd. Then she placed a single file at the court's steps, case ID F3499, Deja Morgan, and walked away. Behind her, a reporter asked, Congresswoman Crockett, are you proud? She stopped, turned slightly, and said, I'm not proud yet. I'll be proud when the truth becomes boring. When justice no longer needs heroes. And with that, Jasmine disappeared into the morning light. The system would never be the same. And the silence, it never returned.